we're back here inside the collective. It is 8:03 Eastern Standard Time here in the late evening hours on Tuesday, January 27th. Tonight's show is brought to you by our friends at Sleeper. I'm Bobby Trossett, joined alongside my co-hosts, Jeff Zrebeck of The Athletic, Cole Jackson of Road Graders. And guys, we got a lot to get to because, Jeff and I were talking about it in pre-show. It's only Tuesday, and it's only been a week, less than a week, I should say, since Jesse's hiring was made official. And, of course, on Thursday, he'll speak for the first time as a Raven in his introductory press conference, which is set for 11:30. Jeff, you'll be one of the many in attendance. And as we set the table, take a look at what we have for you coming up on the left-hand side graphic. The ongoing offensive coordinator search. Guys, a name was added to the list as of last night. We'll see if Chicago approves the request that's been made reportedly for Declan Doyle. We'll talk a little bit about him. I know, Cole, you're going to have a lot to say about one of the reported hires that Jeff was all over last night, in Dwayne Ledford at the offensive line.
Jeff Zrebeck, for all those out there tracking.
And we know you made it your mission there, Rebel, to go and protect our guy earlier today in the Twitter zone. And Jeff, there's not a day that goes by without the boxing gloves coming out for the Canadian himself.
Yeah, that's certainly right. And he can keep fighting my battles all he wants. Well, I deal with a lot of crap from him too, so it's good to see I get something,
A little bit of yang to the yang, AJ.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. It's an interesting time, and it's particularly it's what makes it difficult nowadays is, Jesse Minter is hiring these coaches. He's leading this charge. And they haven't even had his official introductory press conference till Thursday. So he's been in LA with his family after, he agreed to the job. He went home for a couple days, and he'll be back in town, I believe, tomorrow. And then he'll start meeting with coaches. He's got his press conference Thursday. And then I would think it's all things going forward here. My understanding is they'd like to have coordinators in place this week, possibly even tomorrow. But it's hard to do when so many of your candidates are interviewing for other jobs, and there's still so many jobs that are not filled yet, and a lot of movement for all those jobs. So today wasn't a great day, I would say, for their their offensive coordinator search. We'll touch on that a little more. They've got to, what the Ravens do is they wait till they have signed agreements with these coaches, and then they announce them. They don't really announce them piecemeal. So you can trust that they've had several verbal agreements with different coaches. There will be several coaches on staff that will be back that, they protected, they blocked from joining John Harbaugh in New York, a couple defensive coaches. And so the staff's coming together, and I think we'll hear more and more as we move through the week.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Seeing the O-line coach hire before an offensive coordinator was kind of just an interesting move. Not that it's a bad move, and we'll talk about Ledford here a little bit in a minute. Probably the top O-line coach on the market right now, and the Ravens go out and snatch him up, which was great. But I found that just surprising. But I think, when we look at some of these offensive coordinator options that are out there, literally every single one of them comes from a pass game background. So, your O-line coach, who's also been the Atlanta Falcons run game coordinator, definitely doesn't do anything to hurt who he's going to work with. And they have shown that they want to play a certain brand of football in terms of the run game, fits Derrick Henry, Keaton Mitchell, all that stuff. So very exciting there. But were you surprised by that at all, Jay-Z, to see that hire? Or is that just something where they jump on a top guy available just to make sure they lock him in?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And if you look at some of their top offensive coordinator candidates, Joe Brady, Nathan Schoolhouse, Davis Webb, who else do we got? Cliff Kingsbury is probably on that list, but most of them are most of them are interviewing for head coaching jobs, and several of them have had multiple interviews. So you could be waiting 4 or 5 days. You got to move quick. It's very competitive to get these top coaches. Yeah, you'd like the offensive coordinator to be aligned with the offensive line coach, but there's give take there in both sides. So I can't imagine any of their offensive coordinators are going to have an issue with them hiring when the top offensive line coach is available, right? So I think that's a good part about it. They got a really impressive guy who has sort of been praised everywhere he's been. Now we'll see about the offensive coordinator. I kind of hinted at it earlier, guys. I think this was, first of all, I thought Joe Brady was the favorite. I thought he was going to be the guy. Obviously, he's now the Buffalo Bills head coach, so cross him off the list. Now, another guy I know they loved, who I think would have probably gotten a second head coach's interview if they felt like, if they weren't so sold on Jesse Minter and the Raiders didn't kind of push that decision, Nathan Schoolhouse. Now, the issue there is he interviewed for the Browns head coaching job. He's a candidate, apparently, but that's kind of become a train wreck, unsurprisingly. However, Mike LaFleur, the Rams offensive coordinator, is interviewing in Arizona, and they don't have a whole lot of candidates left there. No.
Yeah.
So if he gets that job, you'd almost expect Schoolhouse just to become Sean McVay's offensive coordinator. That would be a comfortable move for him. Then you got what's so funny?
Is that how you say his name?
Isn't it Schoolhouse?
I thought it was Shieldhouse.
Shellhouse? Who cares? Let's go. Move on. I'll know it if they hire him. I'll tell you that. But then you got, Davis Webb. Now they fired their offensive coordinator tonight, Joe Lombardi. Sean Payton fired him, so Denver Broncos have an opening for an offensive coordinator. So all these guys you expected to be right in the mix for the Ravens are either finding jobs or have more comfortable landing spots. So you really wonder how that situation's going to play out.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Ledford a little bit. First of all, this is going to come up. Is that done deal? Like, was it? It was kind of
my understanding. It's a verbal deal. They haven't, they haven't gotten signed contracts yet with some of these guys.
So just to kind of deep dive him, because anybody that pays attention to offensive line play across the league pays attention to guys like Brandon Thorne, Duke Manny-Weather. They're the guys out there that Duke, for those that don't know him, he runs O-Line Masterminds, which is probably the top offensive line training academy. This is a guy that routinely has turned down NFL coaching jobs because he's doing his thing. And if you look at what he has to say, you've got it right up there. They've called him the top O-line coach available. And just the fact that Atlanta wasn't going to hold on to them. That was because Stefanski's bringing in Bill Callahan, and Bill Callahan's got his own pedigree and is great in his own right. So, no disrespect there, but Ledford becoming available was pretty shocking. So, the Ravens hopping on him, and it isn't just that his offensive line coach abilities. He's put together and coached a top O-line in Atlanta. That line is gelled, become one of the top units, but he was also the run game coordinator under Zach Robinson. And Zach Robinson, we've talked so much about guys like Shieldhouse or Schoolhouse or whatever his name is. And, Zach Robinson was that guy before Shieldhouse, right? So it's just interesting to see he kind of flamed out as the OC in Atlanta, but he came in as that pass game coordinator while Ledford ran the run game. And I think that's what makes me so excited, because he runs that wide zone attack. You saw it with Bijan Robinson. You also saw him effectively, after Arthur Smith left, run a two-back system with Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson, which I think fits not just the personnel in Baltimore, but the fact that they have Keaton Mitchell, who has shown that he can make big plays if he's given, the right dose of snaps. And I think this just really lends itself well to the Baltimore Ravens. We know that their offensive line struggled technically, and I think they get a good coach, but a guy that can run that wide zone run game with whoever comes in to be that pass game coordinator. So whether it's Cliff, whether it's, one of these other promising pass game guys, I mean, you could go out and get a Jake Peets from the Seahawks, right? So be a very interesting approach, but Ledford is the top dog available, as verified by these guys out there that know the coaching landscape extremely well. So very good get for the Ravens. But I won't lie. It was funny. I tweeted yesterday, like, everyone chill out. Everyone was freaking out about the Ravens not hiring a head coach. Now they're doing it with the offensive coordinator. But JC's right. Today was not a good day. This wasn't great news. Kind of, if you had a top five, it just wasn't promising signs for 3 of the top 5, I would say. Because now it's looking like Davis Webb would probably stay and just become that offensive coordinator under Sean Payton, especially if he's getting head coach interest. He could take a job now, or he could just do that for another year and go back into the cycle. Whereas if he goes into a play calling role, especially where he's the primary play caller, if it goes bad, he might lose that head coach interest. So, it looks like a pretty obvious move there for him. And it just, the things didn't fall in place well for the Ravens today.
It's not impossible these guys could say, you know what? Yeah, we'd be an offensive coordinator, but we want to go call plays. We think that's where and the Ravens have a play calling job available. They have a job where a coordinator is going to get full autonomy to run the offense. Not saying Jesse won't have input on it, but it's going to be the new offensive coordinator's baby, in connection. So he's going to be the guy. So if Lamar Jackson goes out and wins another MVP award and they get to the next level offensively and they win a lot of games, the offensive coordinator will look pretty good and probably be able to write his own tickets. So, you never know. Yes, there's other OC jobs if those guys stay, but there's a difference between an offensive coordinator job and a play calling offensive coordinator job. And in terms of the play calling offensive coordinator job, the Ravens have the best opportunity available in the league. Even in Pittsburgh, Mike McCarthy said today he's calling the plays. So it's just, there's only so many offensive coordinator play calling jobs available.
And that kind of brings us to, perfect segue here. The new candidate from last night who does exactly that, Jeff, the non-play caller offensive coordinator in Chicago under Ben Johnson, Declan Doyle. Guys, he's 29 years old. That's a 1996 birth year. So I've dug in all morning long. Cole, I'm sure you've been all over this. Jeff, you as well. This guy's a fast riser. Speaking of Sean Payton, Sean had so much trust in him and so much interest in him that he brought him along to Denver after giving him an opportunity in New Orleans for several years. And then Ben Johnson was like, hey, I want you to come to Chicago. And 3 of us know, and everybody watching knows just how close the Bears were from competing for an NFC championship game. So Brad Biggs, longtime Chicago reporter, noting last night that the Ravens have put in a slip to speak with Declan Doyle. Jeff, do you know anything more than that?
No, I haven't heard. And a lot of it, they're operating these searches so quietly. And it's not the same as head coaches where this stuff kind of becomes public. It'll be interesting if he takes I think if he even takes the interview and is engaged in it, that would say a lot, because he flat out told the Eagles, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not interested. I'm going to stay in Chicago. So if he turns around and says, well, you know what? Baltimore's different. I'll go there. That would be quite a feather in Jesse Minter's cap. One thing about Doyle that I always find interesting, the Iowa connection. And we know who's one of Eric DeCosta's closest friends in football. And it's Iowa head coach Kirk Ferentz. And they get a lot of information out of Iowa. They know a lot of people at Iowa. There's strong relationships there. And we can run down the list of prominent people in the organization with ties there, or guys even who have played there. So, no question. I think you used the words fast riser, Bobby, and that's exactly right. He's what has he been coaching for 4 or 5 years, and he's already an offensive coordinator, one of the best teams in the NFC. It's pretty incredible. The next step would be play calling, and then he's going to be another guy on some of the head coaching radar.
I think one thing to really look at with Declan Doyle, because again, a guy that has no play calling experience and hasn't really, I guess this would be his first offensive coordinator role. But prior to this, we know this was Ben Johnson's offense. There's a lot of similarities with what he did in Detroit and then in Chicago, but he hasn't even had any sort of pass game coordination experience. So he's green. We don't if I were to get asked what kind of offense he runs, I can't tell you. I don't know. But I think what's really telling is there was no connection between Declan Doyle and Ben Johnson going into this season. And even their coaching trees, Ben Johnson came up in Miami and then Detroit under Dan Campbell. And so it's not like he was, working under Sean Payton and would have that kind of reference to him. So I found that interesting. I do think, I think Campbell was under Sean Payton at one point, but still, I just thought it was very telling that he would go out and get Declan Doyle in, especially such a young guy, to come in. And there's that quote about what he wanted him for. And he basically said, this kid works his ass off. I know he can game plan, and I know he's going to put in the work in the film room to help me put together a good game plan, which I think is something that you have to take into consideration. But again, it's all going to be about, what's his play design? How does he organize? How does he organize his offense? How's he going to react in situational play calling? All that kind of stuff. And how's he going to mesh as a 29-year-old, walking into commanding an offense that it's going to have guys that are older than him? I think it's just a very interesting situation. But, getting ahead of some of these guys, you might end up getting him for a couple of years as he kind of develops out his resume as a play caller.
I think what's interesting, Bobby, is you look at 3 of the top candidates for this role. And the ones that most people are talking about, Doyle, Shieldhouse, is that better, Cole? Is that much better? Yeah. And Davis Webb. You look at all 3 of those, and they don't have NFL head play calling experience. And how much does Jesse Minter put on that? Does that concern him? Or is they just, what kind of factor is that in the decision process? And if they prefer going with a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, has a lot more experience, obviously he's been a head coach. I do think regardless, they need some veteran coaches on the staff that have been through it. We talked about this last week with Mike McDonald, excuse me, man, it's been a day, but Mike McDonald hiring Leslie Frazier, to bring on his staff. And I think that's very important. And yes, Jesse, you would think would bring his dad over to sort of be a consultant, but I think there's going to need to be some other experienced guys in the room to kind of help them out with certain things. So you wonder how young and how inexperienced in terms of play calling they're willing to go to fill that role.
And that's a great point, Jay-Z. And that's why, when we look at the framework of what a Cliff Kingsbury offensive staff could look like, if you look at what he was doing in Washington, he had Anthony Lynn in there as his running back coach and run game coordinator. So that's a situation where you bring in a guy that's going to come in and that probably be that running back coach, maybe get the run game coordinator role or an assistant head coach type role. But he's going to help out with the running backs, the run game, but also probably help Jesse Minter as he manages some of his first steps as a head coach. I think having those guys that have been there, have done that, I think is really critical. You look at a guy like Ledford. Yeah, he's a veteran. He's been around the NFL for a long time. He gets it, but he hasn't had to, stand up on that podium when he's got 5 injuries, getting peppered with questions. So I think having that type of guy on the roster, I think makes sense. And, it doesn't look like Anthony Lynn's going to land a head coach role. I think he's a guy that would fit really well after looking at what he did in Washington, after looking at what Ledford does with his scheme, very similar wide zone run game approach. It seems like that type of guy that would just be a great fit as that running back coach.
It should be noted too that another experienced coordinator, as we know, was off the board today. Robert Saleh hired Brian Dable to be the play caller in Tennessee. Now, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. Was he on the Ravens board?
Yeah, he was. He's a guy Minter spoke to, I believe. So, he was another one when I was summing up the negative results today or the setbacks today in terms of that search. He should have been included. So thanks for dropping that in. Yeah, it was. I can't tell you how Jesse Minter has these ranked. But if you look just at the list going into this, at least, it's anyone's opinion what they want. I mean, Kingsbury's a polarizing guy. I've talked to some people who would love it and other people who want nothing to do with him. And, so we'll see where he goes. But if you just look at one list of kind of the names, you throw out the names that interviewed for their head coaching job and some of the more prominent names, most of them went off the board today or are in situations where they very well could in the coming days where their current teams made moves that suggest they're trying to keep them there.
I don't want to sell anyone on Cliff Kingsbury, but I do want to address this really quickly because I do think there's a little bit of a weird narrative around him, and it's not necessarily like people always say. I don't want his past concepts, and I'll say, okay, what are his past concepts? Like, let's dive into this, and they'll just be like, well, like it's elementary school. Well, okay, what does that mean? And no one ever gives me an answer. It drives me nuts. But people always say his offense drops off after 1 year. And there's just not a whole lot of evidence of that happening. So I went back through the numbers. He got his coaching start as a QB coach to Case Keenum at Houston when Case Keenum was out there throwing for like almost 6,000 yards every year. He went 5,000 in 2008, 5,600 in 2009, and then 5,600 again in 2011 with 48 touchdowns. There was no fall off. Obviously, we know what he did with Johnny Manziel at A&M. Then he goes to Texas Tech. He had top 40 offenses with Baker Mayfield and Davis Webb and Patrick Mahomes, 2 straight years with Patrick Mahomes. Then he maintained 23rd and 16th overall with quarterbacks named Nick Shimonek, Alan Bowman, and Jet Duffy. And I watch a lot of football. I don't know who these guys are. No disrespect. If you're following the channel right now, please hit that like button. No disrespect to those guys. I just don't know them. But he still maintained those top 30 offenses. Then he goes to Arizona. His best year in Arizona was actually his third year. The wheels fell off in his fourth year in 2022, but Kyler got hurt 11 games in. He was 3-8 before that with only 17 total touchdowns in 11 games, so fair enough. They had a bunch of injuries. Goes to USC, goes to the Commanders. And yes, with the Commanders this year, even before Jaden Daniels got hurt, that offense hit some sort of wall. So I think that's where it came from. But everybody kept saying Cliff Kingsbury's offense fails after 1 year. In his history, that hasn't been the case. So I'm not necessarily out on Cliff Kingsbury. I'm not really in on him. I would have to go study his offense to know more. But I'm just surprised by how many people aren't interested in him to come in here and be an offensive play caller, given he's put together pretty consistent offenses with dynamic quarterbacks. He's done it with Mahomes. He's done it with, Baker Mayfield, who could run. He did it with Kyler, obviously. Did it with Jaden Daniels. It just seems like a pretty good fit. And then you factor in that when he was with the Washington Commanders, he did bring in a run game coordinator and he could focus on his pass game, and the Ravens have set up their staff for him to be able to do that. So again, not necessarily sold on Cliff. I had him number 4, I think, in my video, maybe number 3. I had Joe Brady as number 1, but I'm just surprised again at the reputation he has from Ravens fans.
Jeff, would you say it's safe to say at this point, knowing that he's been a free agent for weeks within the coaching world, that he is not on their short list or not at the top of their list?
Who, the Ravens?
From a Kingsbury perspective?
Yeah, I don't think he was one of the top candidates. Top 5, maybe. From the sounds of it, top 5, I would say, maybe in the back end there. The question now is if Davis Webb gets the Raiders job, it's rumored that Cliff Kingsbury is his offensive coordinator. So that would knock 2 more candidates off the list. So who knows? I've heard, at one point he was supposedly teamed up with Anthony Weaver with the expectation Weaver would get a job. That hasn't happened. Then you heard he was connected to Jesse Minter. I think that's turned out to be quite overblown, because if he was Jesse Minter, he was apparently one of the guys, but if he was Jesse Minter's top guy, it would have already been out that he's their offensive coordinator. And now you hear he's Davis Webb's guy. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. One thing I do like, Bobby, about Cliff Kingsbury, Cole does a nice job of talking about the X's and O's and all that. I like his demeanor. I mean, he's a really laid back, calm guy who has been there. And I'm not going to get all into the Todd Monken, Lamar Jackson dynamic. I love Monken, but it's kind of, he'd be a different personality for Lamar. He's more laid back and calm, and where, Monken can be kind of a fire plug, as we all know and we've all seen. And not just for Lamar Jackson, but for Jesse Minter, to have a guy who is very settled and confident and has kind of a swagger about him running the offense, I think that would be a pretty comforting thing for a first-year head coach. So I do like that aspect of Cliff Kingsbury. And I also want to add, I talked to a coach in the NFC who's competed against Cliff Kingsbury an awful lot. He likes it. He liked the pairing with Cliff Kingsbury and Lamar Jackson. And what he kept talking about is kind of play more spread out a little bit and allow Lamar to play with his instincts, allow Lamar to be more instinctual in how he goes about things. He thought that would really help Lamar. So as we kind of add in all these opinions here, there's some people who really like that fit.
While we're on the topic of offensive coordinator, there's a lot of people that are wondering if quietly behind the scenes, I know he gave an interview last week to a New York outlet, and he's just essentially said, hey, I'm waiting by the phone. There's a new staff. But T. Martin has a rapport with Lamar. He's worked with him for a while now. It's on a quarterback's coach perspective. He came into the organization as the wide receivers coach and, worked closely. And when they got rid of James Urban, obviously he was promoted from within. Lamar's spoken highly of him. He's spoken highly of Lamar. Do you have any kind of perspective on his candidacy and whether or not he remains in Baltimore when all is said and done?
Yeah, I would probably say no, but I'm not ruling it out. I only say no because usually you want the offensive coordinator to bring in his own quarterback coach. That's such an important relationship. And if T's not going to be the offensive coordinator, and one thing my understanding is Jesse is talking to the current coaches, and he has meetings scheduled. I've talked to a couple that are supposed to talk to him a little later this week. Probably when he gets into town Wednesday, that'll accelerate a little bit. But I think you got to let the offensive coordinator pick his quarterback coach just because that's such a big relationship. And that's so important that they're on the same page. They're seeing things in the same way. They're teaching things in the same way. You can't have different voices in Lamar Jackson's ear that are saying the opposite, that aren't on the same page. So I'm not dismissing. I don't want this coming off as T. Martin's gone. I'm not dismissing his candidacy all. I think we know that they really like him as a coach. We know he's very close, probably the closest person in the building to Lamar Jackson in terms of their working relationship. However, I'm only saying that if they bring in a new offensive coordinator, I think that would be that could be a little awkward if they keep the quarterback coach in place.
Cole, anything before we go to break?
Yeah, just with T. Martin, I mean, again, a guy that he coached, he was the offensive coordinator when Sam Darnold was coming out of USC. So obviously his offense put together a top quarterback pick. No doubt about that. If you look at the numbers, I think it was 2 back-to-back top 35 offenses. And then in the year after Darnold left, he had, guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, young Amon-Ra St. Brown, Michael Pittman, some of those receivers kicking around that got drafted over the next couple of years. But that offense fell down to 92nd, and then he lost his play calling duties. So I don't know. Just with T. Martin as an offensive play caller, it just strikes me that he was the quarterback coach and a wide receiver coach in a Lamar Jackson offense that yielded multiple MVPs, and nobody came calling for an offensive coordinator role. There's some guys that just stick as positional coaches. I think T. Martin's one of them personally. That's just my take on it.
Quick word here from this episode's sponsor. We'll be right back in 30.
Sleeper is the #1 fantasy sports app. It pays to know sports. Pick more or less on top players. Your first pick is on us, so start winning now. Play in Texas, Georgia, Minnesota, and 27 more states. Pick anytime across all sports, pregame or live. Over 10 million players are already on Sleeper. Make your picks count. Score up to 1,000 times your cash. Join today. Get up to $100 credit using code HMA. Call your shot on Sleeper. Download now.
Sleeper, has been sponsoring the program all season long into the offseason now. And if you use promo code HMA, that's HMA, you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. You can see Sleeper's terms of use for details. It's currently operational in over 25 states and counting. Check out Sleeper for more today. We appreciate them for their support. And we appreciate all of you guys for being with us. Another big show as we continue stacking here inside the collective, over 1,100 concurrents and counting. We did a call to action last week, guys, and we were like, look, sometimes you just start watching us and you start getting into the habit and making us your routine, and you realize, damn, at the end of the day, I didn't even subscribe. So if that's you, could you check? Could you triple check? Could you double check? And if you aren't subscribed to the collective, we would appreciate it. We're coming up on 6,000. That's our next milestone. So thanks for being here. And on the way in or out, if you could like the video, again, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Gentlemen, let's get to some super chats. Jeff, this one's from you, from Sammy.
Jeff, the sense I get is the Ravens weren't in on Clint Kubiak as a finalist. Any thought as to why? He seemed like a perfect fit. Yeah, I don't believe Clint Kubiak would have been a finalist for this job. And I said it a couple times. I think people look at how well Seahawks. What's that?
The X's and O's.
Yeah. I mean, I think people look at how well the Seahawks are playing offensively, and Kubiak's just done a fabulous job. Like that game plan the other day. But that's only small part of it. I don't think people want to hear this, but the success of the unit he's currently running is only a small part of it. And from the very beginning, you heard some questions, and I don't want to disparage Clint Kubiak because personally I don't know him. And most people I talk to thinks he eventually will be a very good head coach. He's kind of this old school football guy who loves rolling up his sleeves, getting in the lab, designing plays. But there's so much more that goes into head coaching. There's leading a room. There's communicating with players, communicating with other coaches. There's being the face of the franchise out front to the public, in the community, to your team, in the meeting rooms. There's meeting with media 3 or 4 times a day. And the sense I got all along, and I would have to assume that's why he hasn't gotten an offer yet from other places, although it seems he's a finalist for Vegas, is there was concerns about his readiness for that part of the job. Offensive coordinator, designing plays, he's calling a game. He's been at the top of his game. He really has. And maybe that gets him a job anyway. But as I was trying to say throughout the whole process, I think there's a lot else that goes into being a head coach. There's also hiring a staff. That's another thing. So, and I think there was some concern about his readiness for all that other stuff that doesn't kind of resonate that resonates on other days beyond game days. That's probably the best way I put it without trying to disparage him, he's just done an excellent job.
This is why we're a dynamic duo. I'll do the X's and O's and you do the other stuff. There we go.
I'll keep the common sense. Yeah.
Thanks for the super chat, Sammy. Sammy also writes, is the Ledford deal finalized, which we've covered. Ocean08 says to Jeff, how close are Lamar and the team to a contract extension? It's annoying that Florio keeps spreading garbage. Is it within the next month or so?
I mean, they're going to do that deal behind closed doors and not going to leak it because, as I've said before, anything that got leaked during the first time where they negotiated further drove a wedge between Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. He does not trust easily, and when stuff starts leaking out about it, and he thinks the Ravens are behind the leak or whatever, because no one from Lamar's inner circle leaks anything. So when stuff starts coming out, that just makes it difficult and doesn't help the trust between player and team. So that's my long way of saying they're going to be very quiet about it. I have not heard anything to indicate they're close. However, nothing on that front would surprise me. And what does free agency start, boys? Was it March 10th or around there, March 8th or 10th? So that's the magic number. Yeah, you'd like to have it before then so you get a better idea and you have more time to plan how much money you're working with, how much space you're working with. However, that deal needs to get done by early March. So they still got some time there. I thought all along the first 2 priorities are finding a head coach and building a coaching staff, and then they'll start going into some of the roster decisions.
Cole, that brings us to another one from Sammy. Why don't you take this one?
Not to harp on Mike Mack, but did the Ravens ever consider a succession plan a la EDC? It's also interesting to wonder if JH was fired, whether or not Mike Mack would have been willing to. It's an interesting comment. Now who's the goose? It is an interesting point. I mean, you see that with front offices a little bit more. Jay-Z, you could probably speak to this a little bit better than me in terms of EDC turning down jobs to kind of stay with the Ravens. You just don't really seem to see it with coaching staffs quite as much. I don't think, especially because like Ozzie walked away and then Eric took over, which it was always my impression that was kind of the setup. Ozzie was eventually going to take a step back. Eric would kind of take that lead role. I don't think John Harbaugh was going to operate, knowing he was going to get fired so that Mike McDonald would succeed him. But I mean, if they did make the unlikely decision in 2023 after the AFC Championship game to fire John, I'm sure they would have promoted Mike Mack. It was just unlikely that they were ever going to do that.
you want me to add to that, Bobby? You're looking at me like you want you.
Well, was there any common sense in that? I don't know.
No, you know how this topic drives me crazy because people make like it was a no shit decision.
I added the common sense. I did good, didn't I?
Yeah.
Now try doing that on Twitter, Canadian boy.
I'm just saying, like, look, did they go? They went 13-4 that year, correct? 13-4 and played in the AFC Championship. Was that what it was, or maybe 12-5? I forgot, but they weren't going to fire John Harbaugh at that point. They just weren't going to do it. And maybe you say it was time, and they didn't coach that game well, and he showed, but it just wasn't going to happen. Not in this organization, and it happens. I back in the day. I actually I wasn't my lead beat, but I did some Maryland football. And I remember the coach in waiting arrangement between Ralph Friedgen and James Franklin. And it was so stinking awkward. It was just so awkward. And it went belly up and blew up in their faces. I just think those arrangements are so hard because at some point you're basically forcing out the guy who's been there for a while, or you're pissing off the other guy who's waiting for his opportunity and saying, no, wait another year. Wait, no, not this year. It's so awkward. And I don't think it would ever been a coach in waiting situation like that. It's different as a front office. It's very different in that situation. Eric had spent his whole career in Baltimore and where he started, and his wife was from here. So him staying here was one thing, but Mike Macdonald, at his age and stuff, he just, he wanted to be a head coach. His defense won the Triple Crown. You want to strike when the iron's hot, because we've all seen assistant coaches who've been very highly thought of and are on a high and are the belle of the ball and getting all these offers, and they say, no, I'm comfortable. And then 2 years later, the bubble bursts and they're still sitting where they are. I mean, I just think the circumstances stink. Mike Macdonald's is awesome. I'm sure that there'll be kind of mixed feelings from the fan base if he wins the Super Bowl, because some people say that should have been for us in terms of the Ravens. I do nothing but applaud for Mike Macdonald. He's a great dude. He's worked his butt off. He's going to be contributing to changing this idea that you can only hire the hot young offensive coaches and win big. And I think it's great what they're doing. It's been a pleasure to watch that team play. It's unfortunate it's not in Baltimore, but it's just one of those things. The timing wasn't going to work out unless they just Steve Bisciotti says, you know what, I'm firing John Harbaugh after an AFC Championship game. And I think we all know how the organization works, and we all know how that wasn't even discussed.
For the record, the beginning, I was looking at you because I was chuckling at the beginning of the way Sammy wrote that super chat, because I think your pet peeves are well known. Not to harp on Mike Mack. We ask this question to Jay-Z.
Well, we discussed this morning, Bobby. We did. So, that's what I thought you were looking at me for, because but no, I think it's a fair question. Yeah. I just don't think it's reality. And there's situations where coaches have been fired after, having a great season, but usually they have a lot to do with a problem between the head decision maker, the owner, and the head coach, or some sort of power struggle there or contract issue there. None of these things were in place at the time.
Patrick wants to know if you've jotted anything down ahead of Thursday's 11:30 introductory press conference for Jesse Minter.
Sure. I mean, there's so many questions. You want to ask him about his coaching staff. You want to ask him about sort of some of his coaching philosophies, his coaching influences. You want to ask him about, was this the job he wants, or was there some kind of, I don't want to, trepidation is probably too strong a word, but was there some concern about following John Harbaugh and being in that shoes as considered a Harbaugh guy, whether that's fair or not, and replacing him? You want to ask about his rapport with Lamar Jackson. What does he remember about his first time was here? How close were they? Has he talked to Lamar since? You want to ask him about whether the Raiders offer sort of allowed him to kind of put the screws to the Ravens, say, look, I want to be here, but you guys better ante up or I'm headed to Vegas. So there's plenty more. I could probably think of 50 questions here to ask him. It'll just be interesting. One of the things that I'm really interested also is just to see how much he grew as a coach from a leadership and personality standpoint. Because when he was here, he was a very quiet guy. And he wasn't really, he was a defensive assistant, but then even when he elevated into be a position coach, he wasn't a guy that had the most dynamic of personalities, or you heard a lot when you're watching practice and you heard him yelling. He kind of came off more of a very quiet, laid back guy. And yet you hear the Chargers players calling him an alpha and saying they jumped through a wall for him. So it's obviously he's developed that leadership and some of those qualities, which is what I'm guessing Clint Kubiak will do as well. And that's kind of what I was getting at. I think Jesse, when you talk to people who've been around him, talk about that aspect of his personality and his leadership really growing.
I just had to Google what trepidation means. So, I mean, this is a daily occurrence with Jay-Z. If anyone knows, he says all these journalist words and I have to Google them. It's like having a word of the day calendar.
My dad, who's a big listener, will be proud. He's on me about my vocabulary and how many ums I say and when I say like too much. So he'll be proud of me dropping these words. I used the word apoplectic to him today, Bobby, or yesterday. He had no idea what it meant. He was just flummoxed.
So for those keeping track at home, trepidation is a noun, and it means a feeling of fear or agitation about something that may happen. So I have trepidation about when Jeff says words I don't know.
It's gotten to a point of intentional jargon usage, right? Just to fuck you up. That's what he's trying to do.
I'm a football guy. I'm not. It's not a whole lot going on up there.
Is it too much of an assumption? Is this too much of an assumption, or is it just obvious that Jesse will be the primary defensive play caller at head coach? That will be asked on Thursday, just to confirm, right?
100%, Bobby. Yeah, that's another question that he will be asked. Anyone I've talked to said that's the plan, but who knows? Who knows? We haven't even gotten a defensive coordinator job either, guys. We could hit on that a little bit later, but
yeah,
I'd fully expect that he's the guy calling the defense. That's his strength.
After studying it, I sure hope so, because man, that defense is fun to watch.
Yeah.
And unsurprisingly, it's not going to be Denard Wilson, because I'm sure he knew that Jesse was going to be the guy, and now he's going to get a chance to obviously continue to work under John Harbaugh.
He interviewed though, Bobby. He interviewed this weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he was on their list. Yeah, Frank. It's a little interesting. He got hired by the Giants a couple hours after that interview. That's kind of interesting. I don't know.
What do you make of that? So we'll get to this. This one's for you, Cole, in a second. We'll get to that in a second. But what do you make of that though? Because if we're leading ourselves down the right path here with what you're hearing, Jeff, and what feels obvious that Jesse's going to call his own show, then why would Denard have been interested?
I mean, there's only 32 of them, guys, and there's really not even 32 at this point. There's a lot of those jobs that are filled already. So I think you keep all your options open. You interview. Denard was very well liked and very well respected here. The Ravens treat their coaches well. They're a perennial winner. Subtract this past year where things didn't go well. So it's not the worst place to be as an assistant coach, even though if you're not calling plays. So there's only so many of them out there, and I imagine – look, who knows? Maybe Anthony Weaver's back if he can't get something. Yeah.
Not to mention, like, even though he's not calling the plays, people go after head coaching jobs. They go after coordinators of winning teams. So if he thinks coming to Baltimore and being the defensive coordinator for an organization that could compete for a Super Bowl next year, it might get him in line for a head coaching job if that's what Denard Wilson's end goal is.
Wasn't a fun couple years in Tennessee. I know that. Not a chance you read this is here for you.
Cole, you mentioned that you'd like to address guard and free agency opposed to the draft. Who do you like? An aging Zeitler, Simpson? Free agent depth seems poor to me. I do tend to agree with you overall. There's a guy, if you want to go for the big ticket item, you'd have to go after like an Elijah Vera Tucker from the New York Jets. I think he fits that scheme that we've talked about, where I'm expecting that wide zone scheme from Ledford that will build on what Todd Monken did here. I think it's a great fit. I think he'd be very good. Concern with him is just his health. He's been hurt a lot. So how is that going to hit his pocketbook? Because he is the top guy. He's probably still going to get paid. Are you willing to take that risk? That becomes the question. The guys that I've been looking at are the aging guys from the Cleveland Browns. Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller are two guys that I think you can go out. You can get 1, maybe 2 years out of a guy that's just a known commodity. Maybe not so much Bitonio. He really seemed to show his age last year. And I put Zeitler in that same category where, like, I know what I'm going to get from him, but it's just Father Time catches up to us all. And I think that's going to happen with some of these guys. I also think Wyatt Teller fits the scheme pretty well. I think it'd be a good ad where you can just kind of get him on a cheaper deal, very similar to when they added Kevin Zeitler the first time around. So, either you go for the big ticket guy or you look at who's that 3-year, $30 million guy where you're going to get that proven steady guy. You don't have to overthink it. He just comes in, fills a spot, and gives you starting caliber guard play while you sort out the other spot between a rookie and Emory Jones. And that's assuming that they re-sign Tyler Linderbaum, because if they don't have Tyler Linderbaum, this offensive line from the interior becomes a whole lot more of a question mark.
I was just going to tee you up, Jeff. Outside of Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers extensions, is there a bigger priority for the organization outside of Linderbaum?
There shouldn't be. There really shouldn't be. I know there seems to be mixed about he didn't play that well this year, and do you want to invest that much in the center? And he's always going to struggle against the big, really big nose tackle, D tackle types. I don't think you want to live in a world where you have to place 3 guys inside, given their limited resources to fill some holes this offseason. And yes, they could create plenty of cap space depending on what they do. They get the Lamar deal done, and we're talking about a group of different players here, but I don't know how you can just let him walk and think you're going to find 3 above average interior offensive linemen, whether it's in free agency or the draft. There's only so many assets you have to be able to do that. I wonder, guys, and people are going to say I'm crazy, I wonder if you do enough elsewhere, cutting money elsewhere, and you get a Lamar Jackson done where you can stomach putting the franchise tag on him for 1 year, as costly as it would be. And yes, there's no separate designation for center. Like, I just wonder if you say, you know what, we don't feel great about this, but Linderbaum's had some issues that he's played through over the years. We want to see a little more after we felt like he struggled parts of last year. Let's franchise him and fix the guard spots and see what he does this year before committing to him. I mean, will player be pissed off? I mean, sure, but Linderbaum's a total pro, and that's a huge paycheck for 1 year. So I'm not saying they're going to do that, but I know we've dismissed that as an option because of the cost of the franchise tag for a center. However, they could operate from a standpoint of they did carry over a lot more room than I think most people expected them to. They got some stuff done in the offseason in terms of during the season, in terms of deals with Travis Jones and Andrews. And I think there's a couple guys that are clear walk guys that you don't expect them to resign. And there's a couple clear cuts that's going to create money. So you just never know. You really don't. I don't think that's totally out of bounds that they do that if they can't agree to a deal.
That tag would be north of 25, no?
Yeah, I think it is. I saw the number the other day. It's definitely over 20. It's huge, don't get me wrong, but you can stomach it if you're concerned about the long term. And it's better to deal with that in 1 year than to sign a huge extension and have concerns down the road. There's the old adage, there's no such thing as a bad 1 year deal.
Good super chat there from Nada. Steve was referencing something we discussed earlier on with Declan Doyle withdrawing from consideration at Philadelphia's offensive coordinator. And Steve's like, the thing is, Philly's gone through how many OCs? And Brian Dable turned down that opportunity to instead work with Cam Ward and Robert Saleh in Tennessee. Bucket Bomber win is here for you, Cole.
Charlie Weiss Jr. has play call experience. Son of Charlie, mentors Boston Notre Dame. It's a great point. Beat Brian Kelly, mentors Boston Cincy. And Kirby in playoff with Trinidad. Worked for Saban, Aussie's BFF. We all know that. Munkin was SEC OC hire also. That's a guy that I haven't dove into, and I'm definitely going to have to.
Didn't I read today he took his name out of the running for a job, an NFL job?
Did he?
Is that right. Eagles too?
He did. Let me go. I'll find that for you. Because I saw that.
Cole, go ahead, bud.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I think he was involved in one of the situations, and I think he said he's staying with Lane. That's where he is, right? He
was, and shockingly, Ironically, it was Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So there you go. But how about the way Bucket Bomber Win kind of tied in all of Jesse's coach life, right? Like together. That was well done, including his father, Rick, that we've already spoken about as well. And who knows when, if he ends up on that staff and maybe some sort of senior consultant role as he was in Los Angeles. Queon says, Cole, now that we have an upgraded offensive line coach, check out Vega. We talked about this at length today on the Vault, and I looked like an idiot with my pronunciation. I have not shifted gears yet to the draft yet. I know you have, Cole. But here, you take this because I'm going to botch it again. Take out of Penn State, the guard.
Oh, God. This is how I've been saying it. Check out Vega Juan, guard out of Penn State. Get you started on the draft. It's funny. I actually watched him last week after Jay-Z reamed me out for not getting into the draft enough yet. He was one of the first guys I watched, and just a guy that I'll give a quick little synopsis. Just a guy that's more of the big, powerful gap scheme fit. It's not that he's not athletic, but I don't think he has that top level athleticism that would fit the wide zone run scheme that I'm expecting from the Baltimore Ravens. If you're going to spend a first round draft pick on a guard, they got to be that perfect scheme fit. And I think the Ravens really need to continue to prioritizing athletes on the line. It's not taking anything away from him. Again, if he's asked to down block a guy, he's clearing off, 1-2 yards per snap. So no disrespect to him. He's a good pass blocker as well, but I'm really prioritizing these more athletic guys. And so it would put me a little bit further down the list in terms of Ravens fits.
Thanks, Queon. Appreciate you. I'll get that pronunciation guide down in the coming weeks. Dylan says, thoughts on college offensive coordinators. Love the show and Cole's Twitter beef with everyone.
See, it's endearing.
You've been upgraded to everyone. I think that's probably a valid phrasing there. But thoughts on college OCs? Well, first of all, we don't know of any college candidates, but Eric said that, or Steve said, or maybe both of them said that they fielded calls. We still don't know if they made calls, Jeff.
Yeah, they interviewed college coaches. I can't. I'm not gonna. I'm not protecting information. I just don't have it good enough to on enough of authority to say with confidence who they were. But they did talk to multiple college coaches as part of this process. Whether there were formal interviews or more conversations, I do not know. I'm not aware of the level of conversations, but that list jumped from 17 to 20 really quick. So there was 3 more that didn't get out. And, I think there's a couple of those were college coaches in there at least. So,
and to confirm that would be outreach on the team's behalf.
What do you mean, that they called them?
Meaning they sought out the candidates at the collegiate level.
I'm not sure who made the first call, to be honest. It could have been Bisciotti said coaches were calling them, and that's true. They got a lot more than 20 people who called and said, hey, I want to interview for this job. Yeah. So maybe it started with a college coach's agent saying, hey, if you guys are interested, he'd be interested in listening, so-and-so. And then they called from there. Or maybe there was guys they just liked and said, hey, we called the AD and we're interested in your head football coach. Can we interview him just to be above board on everything? I don't know exactly who made the first call, but I'm confident that they interviewed college coaches during this process. Now, I think the Mike Mickens hire from Notre Dame is a reminder that Jesse has a lot of connections here. We don't give him credit because he hasn't been around of that long in terms of the NFL level. However, he's calling everybody, I think you can assume. I'm sure he's gotten.
And that connection went back to 2007. When he was a grad assistant, Mickens was an All-American at Cincinnati.
I love that. I love kind of a diverse staff where you get good ideas from the college level. And this guy knows a lot of people from the college level. He'll help during the draft process because he's prepared and played against a lot of these guys. So I would assume they are talking to college coaches, Dylan, for the OC and even the DC job. I think that's that's part of what Jesse is doing, and doing a bunch of different interviews on that and trying to find the right fit. Unfortunately, I don't have any specific names for you. I know defensively, Chris O'Leary is a guy, the Western Michigan defensive coordinator, who you hear connected to Jesse a lot. He used to be a Chargers secondary coach. I think I brought him up last week. I think there's a dynamic, that kind of a family thing that forced him to leave the NFL and go coach college where he's been coaching. And I don't know about his availability, but I know he's a guy who's very close to Jesse Minter, was once considered a rising star in the coaching ranks. And I think Jim Harbaugh said those words in particular when Chris O'Leary was with the Chargers. So I think they are talking to college coaches for different roles, as we already saw with Mike Mickens. With
Mickens, too, anybody that watches South Bend Irish football knows that that secondary is no joke under his tutelage. And man,
they're putting out a lot of players, a lot of good players these days in that secondary.
That trail goes all the way back to Cincinnati too, with Sauce Gardner and Xavier Watts at Notre Dame and several others that are up and coming as well. So intriguing hire for sure. Chris floating out the idea of Vikings quarterbacks coach and former QB himself, Josh McCown. Guys, help me out here. In the last 2 years, he got a head coach look, did he not?
Yeah, he's been interviewed. I think multiple, I think he's gotten a couple interviews.
Yeah, okay. Chris.
But what is he doing now? Is he at Vikings? Is he McCarthy's?
Quarterbacks coach. Yep.
Yeah.
He's been there, and prior to that, he was in Carolina with Bryce.
You know what I saw, guys? I'm not suggesting this, and obviously people feel different ways about him and what sort of got him, I don't know, blackballed may be strong, but ostracized from the NFL. I saw that. I just read something. One of my colleagues at The Athletic, our Jets reporter, Zach Rosenblatt, is reporting that the Jets reached out to John Gruden for a spot on the Aaron Glenn staff, and he said he wasn't interested. John Gruden loves the Ravens. We all know that. He loves Baltimore. I have not heard anything about that, but that would be an interesting guy to have around, surely.
You just want him for the quotes. That's what you're looking for.
My God. I mean, between Cleveland and
he can call an offense, though, Cole. Let's be clear. I mean,
I'm not going at him on Twitter, that's for sure. He'll beat the shit out of me.
I mean, what a black eye process the last month's been for Cleveland and New York. They can't sign anybody up to be part of their program.
Cleveland's got it. It's got to be the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen. Like, people just have no interest in going there. I love it. I love every minute of it.
The Monken thing's fascinating. I didn't think it was just a courtesy interview. Todd's well-liked and highly thought of around the NFL, and he's probably of the age that he would take the job, and he's not worried about it. He wants a head coaching shop, but he has everybody, what they're saying out of Cleveland, I don't have any insight there from my perspective, but what they're saying is he has a legitimate shot to get that job.
How fascinating would that be? Easy defensive coordinator hire. Jim, you aren't going anywhere. You're staying right here, right? You keep Schwartz on staff, and you figure out whether or not you want to call the plays. I'd imagine he'd want to, but as a first-year head coach, you never know. Larry Money says Mike Denbrock as offensive coordinator. Everybody's throwing in their recommendations right now. I have to look up who Mike Denbrock is.
Well, speaking of connections, one guy that kind of popped into my mind was Luke Heward, who was Georgia State's offensive coordinator when Minter was a defensive coordinator. He's the offensive coordinator at USC and has been with USC since 2022. That could be one of those surprise out of nowhere college guys that could get a look and has a connection to Minter.
Mike Denbrock is the Notre Dame offensive coordinator, tight ends coach, has been under Marcus Freeman since 2024 and at that program for a long time.
They keep rating that Notre Dame program. There's going to be some angry people. They did not like the Notre Dame response to losing Mickens. Not the team. They were happy for him, but I mean the fans weren't happy with that loss.
That's how you know it's a good hire.
Yeah, the blog community was going nuts too. I read a bunch of them. They really think highly of the newest Ravens DB coach. Way2V says, Jay-Z, thoughts on the Bateman situation, trade? You fully caught up to speed on a lot of these cryptic posts and Instagram?
I don't put much stock into these. I'm not even on Instagram. I don't have the capacity to deal with that. It would just drive me crazy. X or Twitter is bad enough.
Me sending you reels would put, oh man, you'd block me within one day.
But look, I think Rashad Bateman, I really like him, and he's such a talented dude, but you just wonder if it's time in terms of change of scenery, if it's time. And he clearly wasn't happy this year. The productivity went down. I don't think he could be blamed for all of it by any stretch of the imagination. I saw plenty of times where he was open and didn't get the ball. I think when you look at their offensive issues, there's a lot of people that could look in the mirror and say they didn't do a good enough job. And I think Rashad Bateman's on that list too. So this is the third straight year now we're going into talk and questions about Rashad Bateman's future. Yeah. At what point did you say, look, maybe it's best to get him a change of scenery where he's going to be happier, got to get out of little of this yearly drama, and maybe he's a piece in a bigger trade for a player. He's got a really good contract. He's talented. He's an ultimate change of scenery guy because, as I said, he has the talent and the contract where you could accommodate it. You just wonder if it's time, really. And again, I say this as a guy who's probably been a Rashad Bateman apologist during his career because he's such a good dude and he's been honest about some of the demons he's battled and some of the issues he had, the injuries early. So you want the best for him, but at some point you can't do this every offseason. Yeah. And so you wonder if they have a new coach here. You wonder if this is the offseason. He was almost gone last year. That was very close. He was very nearly a Dallas Cowboy. So you wonder, they've trade talk with him before. They know the teams probably are interested. I don't think it would be a hard move if they said, you know what, this is the offseason where we need to move on. But heck, you trade him, you better have a plan at wide receiver because all of a sudden that depth chart with him leaving and Tylan Wallace is a free agent and DeAndre Hopkins is a free agent, and suddenly wide receiver jumps to one of your biggest needs, and you're probably not going to bring back Likely, so that's one less pass catcher. Suddenly you start worrying about the group of pass catchers that you have. So you can't just dump them for nothing, but you just wonder if they could find a better spot for him and get something that could help them fill some holes too.
They might just have to hire Greg Roman and get Pat Ricard running routes again. No other way around it.
Get Pat Ricard doing some more shallow crosses.
There it is.
There we go. Cole, take this one from Chris.
Mel Kiper has us mocked to wide receiver Mekhi Lemon. Amon-Ra, JSN clone thoughts. Guy that I haven't watched yet, so I can't speak too much about him. Again, I'm not going to blow smoke up y'all's asses. But I do think this raises the question, and Jay-Z just hit on it. And someone, I think it was Spencer Schultz, put it out on Twitter today, the idea of buying your trenches this offseason and drafting at your skill positions. And that includes, your defensive skill position. So if you need a corner, you need a wide receiver doing that in the draft. I do think the wide receiver position is something they will have to attack in the draft. I do think Rashad Bateman will probably be on the way out. I also don't know, is Zay Flowers a lock to get a long-term deal? I really don't know at this point. So, again, the Ravens have continued to chase the number one wide receiver. I will say, and whoever they're looking to bring in, I think they really need to get that big body X at some point. Not necessarily a guy that's 6'4" and 220 and is slow or anything, but they need to get into the mold of a bigger body to complement some of the guys they have on this roster. That's all.
Jeff, there had to have been a correlation between Zay Flowers' offseason representation adjustment, knowing that this offseason was coming up and he'd become extension eligible, which he now is.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's certainly something they'll explore this offseason. Wide receivers who make multiple Pro Bowls and get over 1,000 yards are going to get paid, and they're going to get paid big time on the market. And he's only getting more and more expensive every year. So while maybe it's not a priority early in the offseason, there will be a time where it shifts into one as we go on.
Jeff, take this one from Mike.
I want to say something real quick, guys. Wasn't it glorious that 1 year we didn't have to talk about first-round receivers? That was just so – it lasted all of one stinking year.
I will say I thought it was kind of cool. Sounds like DeAndre Hopkins would be open to coming back. So, it just kind of sounded like it. Cliff Kingsbury did trade for him, and he put up 1,400 yards. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, Cliff is a favorite. That's a guy he really likes,
You can sell me.
in that entire interview with Kay Adams, he did talk about how Baltimore was one of a slew of options that he had a year ago, including New England. You got to be, I mean, come on, he can't be not thinking right now if he ends up in New England. What's he doing? Is he in the off season or is he in Santa Clara? Mike is here. Jeff, for you.
Well, the Ravens led the league in sacks with Mike Mack. Their best pass rushers were Namdi, Matabuke, and Van Noy. Can Minter do something similar? Yeah, they need to get back to being able to scheme up, pressure better, get more free runners at the quarterback. I think we saw the impact of not having Matabuke on the pass rush, all of that. But they also need high-impact players, and I don't want to dismiss Van Noy and these guys. I really don't want. I think Mike Green is going to be a really good player. However, at some point, you got to get away from, we need to scheme a pass rush. They need a game breaker. You want to stop blowing. I've said this rant before, so I'll make it quick. But you want to stop blowing leads in the end of the game. You want your defense to actually start getting off the field late in games. Find somebody who's going to get after the quarterback and sack and get a strip sack or take him down on fourth down or hit his arm and create a interception that way. Find somebody who can close a game. Find a closer, and I think that starts with a high-impact pass rusher if you can do that. So I think Jesse Minter will be able to scheme, and his staff will be able to scheme pass rush and pressure on the quarterback and some of the things that you can do, but you got to stop fully depending on that. You need some guys. You need to bring in a couple guys, and one on the interior and at least one on the edge that can really help you in that area.
We just go Bateman for Max Crosby, 1-for-1. Who says no?
Pop Punk Cowboy says, coming from the vault, I think that's the first F word I've heard Bobby say.
Bobby said a cuss.
we keep it PG inside the vault, so anytime I'm with you guys, sometimes it becomes
that's just when you're with me, but I don't really hear Jeff's.
Maybe. Pop Punk says, loving this content too. Keep up the good work, fellas. We appreciate you, Mr. Cowboy. And CD Stacks here, Cole.
Cole, any ancient Canadian secrets to help a Yank get rid of this bullshit ice snow mix? Well, first of all, I actually do have a bit of a hack. And I know this because Amanda went out and bought a new shovel, and she didn't get one with the metal strip that's attached to the back. That's your pro tip.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you guys salt down there? Is that something Americans do?
Yes.
Okay, so you guys are up to date.
This isn't a third world country. Jesus.
I don't know. You guys don't have snow plows. Like Jay-Z can't even get out of his front door.
No,
right
my
Here we go.
So angry.
I set him off.
My street was not plowed till 11 a.m. this morning, about 36 hours after the damn snow stopped. So I finally got out today. School's already canceled for tomorrow. It snowed 8 inches here and got some ice, and school's going to be closed for at least 3 days and counting. It's ridiculous. But go ahead, Cole. I'm just angry. I've been angry about it all week.
Well, I mean, just, get some salt.
But salt ruins driveways. You don't want to throw salt down in your driveway. You
get the blue stuff, right? The blue salt.
I don't salt. I just go out there and use a little elbow grease and get the ice out.
I am so glad, Cole, that everybody's getting a little snippet into the group message from this morning, because you and I were both like, "Oh shit, we better not mention it tonight. Somebody's gonna catch his wrath." So CD Stack, thanks for bringing it up. Juan 410 says, when do we get a legit answer on Matabuke? It was just 2 weeks ago today, guys, that Bisciotti and DeCosta were asked about it, and then they continue to be tight-lipped on, obviously.
I think they've told you without telling you, but
yeah,
that's just me.
Maybe.
You probably get the answer when they have to restructure his contract to make it easier to move forward. That's probably when you'll get the answer. But I've said this before. You can hear what you want. I think we've all heard stuff behind the scenes there, but he deserves the opportunity to speak on his future on something like matter of this, rather than unnamed sources commenting on somebody else's medical condition and medical prior. You hear a bunch of stuff, but the one who needs to say it are either one of the Ravens' top decision makers, and they've clearly avoided or declined answering the question. So then it falls on Namdi Matabuke or his agent or someone to address it. And they have yet to do that.
Certainly going to change the way you handle free agency in the draft, that's for sure. And you extended Travis Jones, you extended John Jenkins, the vet, to come back on a short-term deal, and obviously you got to bring in a whole heck of a lot more talent there in the interior. Bucket Bomber Win says Dwayne Ledford was offensive line coach while is it Rigoni or Ragone?
I say Rigoni, but I like Italian food, so I usually just go with whatever's
Okay.
Italian.
He was the OC in Atlanta 21 through 23. Rigoni has been QB coach under McVay with the Rams since 24. Rigoni, next Ravens OC.
I thought I read somewhere he's tied with somebody. I read that somewhere today, that he's tied with somebody whose name is not Jesse Minter.
Bucket Bomber Win. We'll see. Appreciate the super chat, brother. And Jeff, why don't you take this one from Mark?
Hold on a second. I'm looking something up.
Okay.
He is supposedly Nate Schoolhouse. And I said that for Cole's benefit. He is supposedly his offensive coordinator if he gets the Browns job.
Schoolhouse and Rigatoni are going to Ohio.
Like I said, I owe you in a collective for super chat. Thanks for always making time for your ears. Mark, that's awesome for me. I did hear from you on Twitter. It means a lot. These super chats or whatever super stickers, I think we need to bring that up. It's blown my mind how supportive and generous you guys have been. I say that in all seriousness. I always like seeing your questions on X, and I don't answer too many these days because the natives have gotten a little restless. But I appreciate you.
Cool. I couldn't help myself earlier on the show. Schoolhouse was killing me. I was losing the ability to form oxygen. I just
That's what happens when you've been with your kids for 4 straight days and they never have to go to school. They just don't go to school.
Jeff wants to send them to the school.
I just couldn't do it. I really couldn't.
I'm dying right now. That would kill me.
Thank you, Mark. The chosen one, Jared, says you don't get too many chances like we.
Don't remind me, Jared.
100%.
Added 23.
And it's just like you look at it from this perspective, and I was thinking about it watching the Patriots game, and it's just like it just reminds you how bad the opportunity was there. I'll give the Patriots all the credit in the world, but they've won. They're on the Super Bowl, and I don't think they've even played a really good game yet in the play. Well, I think Chargers was pretty good, but they've sort of struggled through these last couple, and here they are in the Super Bowl. You just can't miss these opportunities. You just can't. And when you blow it like that, it's only going to stay because you just never know when you're going to have that great year health-wise and when everything's going to break well. And that one is going to loom large for a long time until they get back there.
Cole, JP's in the building for you.
Cole, appreciate you putting out some film of Minter for these part-time fans. Maybe they now see we got a coach who understands the X's and O's. It was actually JP that asked for that last week, and I committed live to get that out So you're welcome. Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, was talking to a couple of players that played for the Chargers last year about their communication, and that was one thing that when you watch the all 22 angle, you pick up on these little things like guys that point and pass off coverages, and the Chargers communication was the one thing that popped to me over and over and over again. They had blown coverages. One of them was actually by Alohi Gilman in week 1 against the Chiefs, which it was funny to see. I think overall it just showed me an extremely well-coached defensive unit. So I'm really excited about what I saw from what Jesse Minter can do from a coaching perspective.
Wonder if Alohi did enough during his time with Jesse to get that extension this offseason. We'll have to see if he's a priority come free agency.
He certainly knows Mike Mickens, right? And didn't Mike Mickens coach him?
Yeah, 2020 he was drafted. He would have been there for his first year. He got drafted the first year Mickens got there, but yeah, they would have overlapped.
There you go.
What are the chances Minter brings back Wink to run the defense?
He's not leaving Michigan. He's going to be happy where he is.
He's getting some interest.
He's not at Michigan anymore, man.
What?
Did you not hear about Sharon Moore? You want to?
Right, they cleared the whole coaching staff?
No, they got a whole new staff in. They got the Utah coach, and Wink interviewed. He's supposedly a finalist.
I thought isn't he like involved in criminal investigations or something?
Who, Wink?
No, Sharon.
Oh yeah, I would say so.
I don't really follow college football. I don't really know.
Yeah, that's been quite.
I didn't know they cleared out
the
whole coaching staff.
Maybe Coleman was right about this guy, Bobby. Canadian boy.
Yeah, well, when you mentioned the question at the presser, I was wondering if anybody was going to ask Jesse Minter if he thinks Justin Tucker would have hit that kick.
Listen,
but no, I don't.
Wait, hold on 1 second, Jeff. What the hell is wrong with your Twitter algorithm, Canadian boy? What the hell's going on up there? For 48 hours, it's all anybody ever saw. You couldn't be anywhere remotely involved.
I don't follow college football. I don't know.
You didn't have to.
Yeah, he was in jail for a while.
I knew he was in jail. I nailed that part. I caught the lead. I found it in my reels on Instagram. I tried to send it to Jay-Z.
No, I think getting back to the question.
I sent it to @Jay-Z69420. I don't know where it went.
Wink's apparently a finalist for the Jets coaching job. I don't know. I wouldn't dispute it, and I love Wink. He's one of my favorite people, but I'm not sure if he's looking for a spot where he wouldn't call plays, and I don't think his issue was with. He still has a good relationship with Harbaugh, but I think when Wink left, it was probably time for him to leave, and I think both sides would acknowledge that. But again, by the way, you know what reminds me of that? Brian Duker, who was another assistant on Wink's staff, just got interviewed. Was it for the Jets defensive coordinator job? It's just amazing how many good coaches they had on that staff with McDonald and Minter. And obviously Wink's gone on and done some good things. And now you have Duker interviewing for big roles.
That was 2017, right?
And Drew Wilkins has been a stud and he's part of that Rams staff. And Danton Lynn was a little bit later on, but he's certainly gone on to have quite a career. That's one thing they've done incredibly well with developing the kind of some of the assistants on the young assistants on the defensive side of the ball.
Hey, while we're on this topic, just quickly, because I got a few questions about it during my show today. Another longtime assistant was Chris Hewitt. Can you kind of jog my memory? Did his tenure not end on the best note several years ago?
He went to Colts to be pass game coordinator, correct?
Yeah.
I just think it was time. They bypassed him for the DC role how many times? Like 3 or 4 where they hired other people. And I think both sides realized he had sort of hit a wall professionally, and there's some frustration there, and it was just time to kind of go. But I didn't get the sense that bridges were burned or any of that.
Okay. Yeah, you're right, though. He's in Indianapolis and just came up earlier today. God, he was with the organization so long he got a ring back in 2012. That was his first year with the Ravens. Chris says, do we really have any money to go get a Trey Hendrickson?
Yeah, if they get a Lamar Jackson contract extension done, then it comes into how do you prioritize Linderbaum? How do you prioritize the Zay Flowers extension? Like, do they have any money? They could, absolutely. Is that where they're going to put it? I don't know. It's tough. Trey Hendrickson is the type of guy that I think they could really use. But Trey Hendrickson's been chasing that big ticket, right? Like he's kind of struggled to get the big contract from the Bengals. He's starting to get banged up a little bit. But I like Trey Hendrickson. I've studied him a ton against Ronnie Stanley. He's one of those guys that gives Ronnie fits because of his power rush abilities. I think that type of rusher ages well because he's not relying on his athleticism. He's a technician. So I do think that would age well, but there's just so many fish they have to fry. So until we know what their financial picture looks like, it's going to be hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, this applies to everybody. Right now, I was looking at a graphic that they're projected to be in the middle of the pack for salary cap space, and that's not a bad place to be for them because usually we're seeing them pretty low, and that's before they make moves and potentially a Lamar Jackson extension. And we know there's going to be a couple of releases, and they'll free up money there, and maybe that something happens with Matabuke's contract where they're able to do something there to kind of offset some of the damage in this coming year. So there's a lot of moves that need to happen before we get a good grip on their cap space.
Ali was jumping ahead kind of to what we were just discussing. He's like, hey, guys, who are some of the players that are locks to not come back in free agency? Looks like KVN might be gone, for example. He had a Twitter exchange just within the last 48 hours was just like, hey, listen, if my phone rings, it rings, but it won't until free agency. And after his last couple of years, guys, if it comes from Baltimore, it'll probably be in the latter stages. Wouldn't you say, Jeff?
Yeah, I wouldn't think so there. I think there's going to be a need to kind of get younger there. You don't want to rule anything out, but I would be a little surprised if he's back. Cole, this is a belt-high fastball for you. This is what is it? Is his name Jeff Hoffman, that awful closer of the Jays? Is that who that is?
Yeah, I don't.
You haven't mentioned the guy's name on the show.
We're an hour 19 minutes in. I'll tell you who's not coming back. Daniel fucking Falele.
I was begging you to get ahead of that question.
I also don't. I was literally sitting here like, can't wait to say Falele. So Falele won't be back. I'd also throw in, I don't think KVN will be back. I personally don't think Alohi Gilman will be back. It's not that I don't want him back, but I don't think our Darius Washington will be back. I think he would fit because I think you can see plenty of examples of Jesse Minter using 3 safeties, but credit to Washington for working his way back last year. That was very impressive, something that he didn't need to do. But I think too much has happened there. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think he's going to go somewhere and get paid. And he took exception. He posted about it publicly when the Ravens chose to, I think they tendered his RFA rather than giving him an extension, if I'm correct on that.
Yeah, they gave him a low tender.
Low tender, yeah. So that's just my 2 cents. That's just what.
And then you got some veteran. Joseph Noteboom was a healthy scratch most of the year. Do you think he's coming back? And new offensive line coach.
And did we mention Daniel Falele?
Yeah, we did mention him. I mean, Tylan Wallace is a guy that, he was a healthy scratch down the stretch, and you'd think he would feel like, and most of the coaches that he was here and that he knew with are no longer gone. So there will be some guys that are sort of perceived as hardball guys who you probably won't see back.
Here's a name for you guys, assuming that likely walks and gets paid. What about Kohler?
That's an interesting one.
I think they'll pay him, but I think it'll depend on who their OC is. I think you can get him, I wouldn't say cheap, but I think you can get a good discount on him. And I think he's shown that he's a really good number 2 tight end. Again, I don't think he's going to cost a whole lot. I don't think he's going to be a vet minimum guy. But I also has he done enough to go get that top money yet? And could he see an opportunity in a 12 personnel offense to be in a role to maybe take a cheaper 1-year deal and kind of play number 2 to Mark Andrews? It's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see Ricard. We've been through the song and dance now. What is this, 3 straight off seasons or 2 or 3 straight off seasons? And it just sort of felt like a formality for how few teams use fullbacks and how much they love Ricard, that even if a team jumped in there, the Ravens would match the offer. He wanted to be here. He still said at locker cleanout, this is where he wants to be. This is where he finishes his career. I'd imagine there's enough people in the building that want to keep him, but you never know, especially if they're a little tighter on the cap and they have other issues where they choose to save money. And perhaps, they'd another fullback on the practice squad all year. I believe they did sign him to a reserve future deal, so he's still under contract. Is this the year they say, you know what, he's not, we're going to miss some of the aspects of Ricard, but we need to repurpose that, whatever it is, 2.5-3 million into something else.
Yeah.
And Ricard's had a lot of surgeries and a lot of wear and tear on that body. Maybe it's the old, better to get rid of a guy a year too early, a year too late. Again, I would bring Pat Ricard back, but I'm just saying, I think you're going to be forced to make decisions like that. And you have a new coaching staff who may not be as attached to certain guys who have been kind of longtime favorite Ravens and favorites of the coaching staff.
Well, and it's going to depend on who the OC is, right? Again, some of these teams, and I was doing kind of the personnel charting, some use tight ends absolutely, or use fullbacks for sure, but some just don't. Some have, no 21, 22 personnel usage. Also, the chat has now renamed Nathan Shieldhaw's Schoolhouse Rock,
Yes.
and I'm just fucking dying at that.
Man, I hope they hire him.
Yeah.
Oh my God. By the way, the practice squad fullback that Jeff referred to was the Army
Lucas
West
Scott of the
Point
Tree Hill
Scott.
Ravens? Is it Lucas Scott?
Tree Hill.
Yep. The Army West Point cadet.
That's quite a
Jeff,
sweater, Bobby. You have a date after this?
Let me pull up a
t-shirts
text.
and hoodies, and you have this nice little
You look
sweater
like you
on.
just came back from 1970s boarding school with the top button down.
You guys are too much. I gotta pull up a text
I
right
didn't
now.
know
My
Hilton
brother,
Caulfield was joining us for tonight's broadcast.
you guys
Hey,
are gonna love this shit.
Hey, it was an hour and 24 minutes before I finally said something. I've been thinking it since the 30-second.
Me and Bobby giggled like school children 3 minutes in.
We did. You guys are everybody's hopping on this trend right here because John, my youngest brother, texted the group chat earlier with a screenshot of one of my earlier programs. He says, Amalfi Coast for the win, # summer in Italy. Hey,
so it wasn't just us.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
Okay.
Jeff, I hope you're sitting down right now. You are, because what I'm about to bring up on the screen, you better be sitting down. Hold on tight. We got a super sticker tonight from Vince Beemore.
Vince.
Yes.
Yes.
He was the guy that asked the question about media availability, wasn't it? Am I wrong last week?
I think
about whether a new coach will mean new media policies and stuff. I think so. I think that was Vince.
That might have been it. Look at you. Wow, you got some
I remember the guys who put the super stickers, they're etched in my mind.
Well, I don't see Mike tonight, and I hope he's all right. Like, I'm assuming there's a reason he's not in the live chat, so hopefully Mike
You probably shamed him on his spelling mistake last week, and he had enough.
JD1313 says 3 dream trade scenarios for the Ravens in the offseason.
Get AJ Brown. That's one.
Keon Coleman, 2.
No, Keon Coleman is a dream trade scenario
for so many people in the fan base.
Really? I mean, Max Crosby's got to be 2. Who else we got? There's got to be one more that we could think of.
Whatever trades Daniel Falele off of the roster. No, who'd be another guy that?
Is there an offensive lineman from the Falcons that they can grab?
Exactly.
Seriously, it's a good question.
No, I mean, the AJ Brown noise is going to be one of the stories of the offseason until he finally is dealt.
That's going to be loud.
Oh man, yeah, that seems like it has to happen given all the noise out of Philly.
Oh, wait a second. We've got a Pickens request here. We've got a George Pickens.
There we go. Request. He's a free agent, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he only signed I'm pretty sure he only signed a 1-year deal in Dallas because they signed him after they didn't hit the Bateman trade, right? That was kind of the progression.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
And then obviously Pickens' money in Pittsburgh went to Metcalf. He's there for the foreseeable future. Did Mike McCarthy's hire bring Aaron back at 44 or whatever old he'll be in September? Is he going to run it back in Pittsburgh? Belichick snubbed by the Pro Football Hall of Fame voting community.
Yeah.
Social media is going off on that.
Do you have an opinion on that? I'm curious.
About him getting snubbed? I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, how is he not a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Who votes on this? Again, this is coming from the fan perspective, but to me, I look at these things and all I can picture is this room full of legacy media guys that are 85 years old, like Bill Polian, that have no clue what they're doing, and they're the ones deciding on this.
Well, you have a couple of the veteran, like, kind of guys like that, and I guess Tony Dungy's on the panel too. Bill Polian's one, and then you have, people who represent, like, Baltimore's representative is Scott Garceau, the longtime anchor on WMAR, who's done Ravens, done
Legend,
yeah, Legend and one. He's the guy from the Ravens. Like, he's the guy that presented Ray Lewis's case, which took about 30 seconds, and all their Hall of Famers. So it is kind of like that. It's changed a lot. It used to be the day before the Super Bowl. This group just kind of met in a room wherever the Super Bowl was and hammered it out. Now the group kind of gets together at another date, and it's a little more, the process is a little different. And it usually, I saw that headline. I'm like, wait a second, that's coming out already. I had sort of forgotten that the policy had changed or the voting procedure had changed, because it used to always be the Saturday right before the Super Bowl. And then those got announced Saturday night at the NFL Honors thing. Or Friday night, it was either Friday or Saturday. So it's changed, but yeah, I don't know how Bill Belichick is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. I do think the whole obsession with, did he make it on the first ballot? Did he make it the second time? That gets a little tiresome, especially in baseball. I think people get so worked up about that. He'll get in the Hall of Fame, and he's going to be a runaway winner next year. You might as well just start, engraving the bust, because after all the negativity and the criticism the people who didn't vote for him this year got, but he should be in the Hall of Fame. It's laughable, that Bill Belichick is not in the Hall of Fame.
No controversial opinion from Jay-Z tonight.
I mean, would you how do you?
You don't reason with it.
It seemed that egregious that I'm genuinely baffled. Like
it's a shame because I'm just so fed up with the Baseball Hall of Fame and then I have a conversation with a couple of my buddies. We always bitch and moan about the Baseball Hall of Fame and how certain guys get in, and then they determine they're the judge and jury of other guys, and they're not allowed in. Like guys that were pretty widely suspected of taking steroids, and even a couple that failed the tests.
Who is it right now that can't get in?
It's been the same. It's been Barry Bonds and A-Rod now. But again, this is like the same. My buddy who reached out to me is like, I thought the baseball was bad, but this is Bill Belichick not getting the Hall of Fame. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, this one's gnarly. You thought Lamar's MVP snub a couple years ago was bad. This is on another.
I'm really curious to see if this is the year for either Yonder or Suggs. It's just not a very big class. There's just not a lot of room for guys, and then you keep moving these guys back every year, and it gets tougher and tougher to get in.
Millennial Raven says, crazy idea. John Gruden for OC. Thoughts? We mentioned this earlier on in the program, and he turned down straight up the Jets inquiry. Twat says, fire EDC and Sashi Brown. Fire Jeff. It's that point in the night, baby.
Out of here. Get them all out.
That's right.
It hasn't been busy enough. These last 3 weeks haven't been busy enough. And I could use another story considering I'm home all day watching my kids because they never go to school. So just bring more of it on.
That's right. Trey says, Geno coming back if he doesn't get the best offer, meaning Geno Stone. I think Geno Stone is who he's referring to. Adafe keeps popping up, Cole. I remember you said EDC and ended sour. Your take on Michael Trigg?
Don't know anything about Michael Trigg. Again, not going to blow smoke up your guys' ass. I think Odafe Owe was, he publicly displayed his displeasure with not receiving a contract extension. So, would that change if they pay him? Maybe. Like he wanted to be paid, especially after Greg Rizzo just got paid. So, I thought that was the issue there. So, we'll see. I kind of doubt it that he'd end up back here. But they do need to find an impact pass rusher somehow.
Thank you, Trey. Janarkis writes with Canadian currency, I might add. Jeff, what are the chances of Linderbaum getting franchise tagged or returning? I think we covered that pretty extensively.
Yeah, I don't think, as I said, I think he's their priority. You look at the free agent list, and I don't think franchise tag, even though how pricey it is out of the question. However, at some point you got to open up some space, and we talked about it. The Lamar Jackson deal will answer a lot of questions for us, and we'll know more in the days ahead if tagging him at that price is even tenable, given everything else they have to do this offseason.
Yep. The real guy, Anise Truth, says my favorite part of these are always the roast sessions.
Yeah, we hit it's like the witching hour. Everyone just gets a little ridiculous, but it's great. Yeah.
I mean, would you guys feel more comfortable with one less button, or what?
Bobby definitely has slacks on up to his teeth right now too.
Here's your boy Cole.
There he is, dug out at 22 inches. Is that inches or feet? We don't do that in Canada.
Inches.
So he's so annoyed. So I make sure my wife was able to get to work with a stomach bug, but I'm still here. Appreciate you, Mikey.
Mike, thanks for being
here. And
I
bet you 22 inches, and those kids were back in school after 24 hours. It didn't take them all week to clean up from 8 inches.
Right. Maryland doesn't have a plan. Straight up.
And they don't have salt, apparently.
Jeff, there's a little bit of a run here. We got a little bit of a run going on. Sammy is back.
Yes.
With a super sticker. And then
MVP
Heather
of the show, Sammy.
Take a look at
your sweater, Bobby, the MVPs of the
show. Look at Heather, Jeff, jumping on here.
Heather, let's go.
In blue, too. What is the difference? Why are some different colors? Why are some of the questions different colors?
Price points. She went for 3.
Oh, shit.
Oh, nice. $3.
$1. $1 ahead. And that brings us to Shawnee, Cole.
Can we get some DC names other than Cullen? I'd personally love Leonard. I think Leonard signed with Buffalo today, or is rumored to be going to Buffalo under Joe Brady. But Jesse will probably call plays. Joe Cullen was a name that popped out to me. Again, a guy that I think he's in a D-line coach role with Kansas City right now. Obviously was part of that 2017 staff that Jesse would have been a part of. I think it'd make a lot of sense, and I think he would come in here and basically be the D-line coach / coordinator. It was interesting when they announced Mickens. They also said he'd be the defensive pass game coordinator. So they've already added that title on. But they usually, when you do that, you usually have a defensive run game coordinator. I think Joe Cullen would be a good fit in that role. As for other names, I mean, there's a lot of names floating around that we've kind of mentioned throughout the night. Nobody really pops to me because a lot of the names, and we talked about this with Denard Wilson, a lot of those, top DC candidates, much like OC candidates with head coaches that are calling plays, I think they're going to want to call plays where they go. And that's not going to be what happens here with Jesse Minter, in my opinion. Well, I guess we'll find out on Thursday. But I would look for someone like Joe Cullen that's kind of that positional coach that, he can go get a little upgrade in pay, and it's a win-win for everybody.
Joe Cullen interviewed already, too, for the job.
Do you have any other names is there any names?
As I said, they interviewed Denard Wilson, and he's gone to New York. Anthony Weaver could be a potential candidate. The Chris O'Leary name we brought up earlier, I don't know about his dynamic and whether it's something he's able to do, but there's another guy. But one of the things I like about Joe Cullen is I like getting a guy in the front. You got I think D'Alessio, one of their DBs coach will be back, and you have Mickens, so you have those two guys. Get a coach up front. I think it can that shouldn't be the prerequisite, but I'm just saying, I like the idea about how that marries everything. Jesse's got his guys in the secondary. Then you get a coordinator and really good D-line coach. You're going to have some young defensive linemen in here you're going to need to develop. So a lot of that is certainly in Joe Cullen's favor.
Jeff, any word on Santucci potentially being retained?
I think he'll be back too. I think that's one of the guys that they blocked. I don't think it's as I said, some of these are fluid. Some of these coaches say, we're thinking we'll be back, but I just got to wait on this because if certain coaches get hired, there could be another opportunity elsewhere. But they blocked him and D'Alessio for a reason. And
didn't Matt Robinson just come on recently too? Wasn't he a new ad?
Yeah, he's an outside linebacker coach. I don't know. I don't believe he was one of the block guys.
Okay.
So I think he's one of the guys that will sit and talk with Jesse and decide if there's a role. I expect Anthony Levine, who's not a defensive guy necessarily, but a special teams. And Jesse was one of his position coaches over the years, so they obviously know each other well. I would think they'll have a talk about where he fits. Maybe he's the special teams coordinator. Maybe they have somebody else in mind for that, and they hire Levine or try to keep him as assistant special teams coordinator. But Levine has gotten some interest around the league, so it'll be interesting. He always is, when in doubt, he'd prefer to be here, but we'll see how that plays itself out. These are some of the conversations that I expect Jesse Minter to have once he gets in the building this week.
And Santucci was brought in as sort of a coveted assistant in the college ranks. He's at Georgia Tech, I want to say.
Yeah.
And,
inside linebacker coach.
And then D'Alessio was a Kansas City tie-in, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So Isaac will have plenty of time. Best player for the Ravens in the upcoming draft. We will be leaning on Cole heavily in the coming months. Chris says, let's go get Tyreek Hill.
Fuck it. Why not? AJ Brown and Tyreek Hill. Let's get them out there.
Please don't.
Jeff,
this offseason's really is going to be hard enough, guys. Let's have some empathy for us that are having to cover this team on a daily basis.
George Pickens and Tyreek Hill in a room with Jay-Z.
Hey, you forgot about AJ Brown. You can go.
When you're a beat reporter,
and they have to shovel 8 inches of snow together.
Man, when you're a beat reporter on a team that employs Tyreek Hill, you have got to work around the clock, around the year.
You know what? I think Jay-Z would be feeling trepidation at that point.
Hey, there we go.
It's not a strong enough word to let you know what I'd be feeling.
Shawnee writes, petition to get Jeff to break news one night on the pod. Ooh.
Sure. See it.
Do you want me to get fired that I'm giving news to these two jokers who I'm sharing the screen with and not,
no, we're
not
the two outsiders with the one insider, remember?
Oh my God. Stevito,
hey, if I got a text like on a position coach thing while we were on the show, I would share it. But right. If it's a bigger story, no, that will not be happening.
Cole, what he's really got to do is, especially for on the behalf of the collective, is tell him to pony up and he'll start breaking news on here. Come on. Super stickers. Pony up the super stickers.
That's what
Super
I'm saying.
stickers only.
Yeah.
I try not to have my hand out too much here.
Stevito says, do we see Humphrey being cut or traded this season?
Most interesting question, I think, personnel question with the team. What do you do there? And when you look at his contract and the whole post-June 1st thing, and do you consider moving him to safety? Do you go ask him for a pay cut? And then once you ask a guy for a pay cut, you're pretty much cutting him if he says no. So that's a really fascinating decision.
My hot take on this is I think, and people disagree with me, and that's fine. I think he's going to fit really well under Jesse Minter. And I don't think the salary cap savings and doing it post June 1 is enough of a benefit for me not to risk him returning to what he did in 2024. I would bring him back. I would smash his microphone so that he can't do podcasts anymore. And I would just bet on a bounce back. That's just my opinion.
Speaking of,
we're all in agreement that Marlon Humphrey's a Ring of Honor guy, right?
Yeah,
probably. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where people that aren't on Twitter probably don't dislike Marlon Humphrey the way people that are on Twitter dislike Marlon Humphrey, because a lot of it, he didn't play well this year, but he played extremely well in 2024. But a lot of the big thing that rubbed people the wrong way and really turned the public opinion around him was having those, like the loss to Buffalo, and then they load up YouTube the next day and he's doing a podcast. Like it just rubbed people the wrong way.
The optics, like the optics.
And whether or not that's BS or not, whatever, that's the reality of the situation. But and to be clear, he did not play very well this year, especially compared to what he can do. I think he's a really good scheme fit for Jesse Minter based on what I watched. That's where I'm basing my opinion off of.
Well, for what it's worth, too, that podcast dropped an episode earlier today, and he did suggest that Jesse has reached out for whatever that's worth. So,
you know what's interesting though? Like, again, you talk about how many needs are you going to create? Like, what are they going to do at cornerback? If Awuzie is a free agent, and did you see enough from PJ Tampa to think? You have Nate Wiggins coming back. Where are your guys coming from?
Yeah.
Do you got to pay for starting caliber corners, or you have to draft them early? And if you want to draft the trenches and you want to get an early pass rusher, and you think you trade Bateman, you will be in the early wide receiver market. You only have so many picks. Like at some point, at some point, you can't keep creating holes that are going to be hard to patch.
The real guy, Anise Truth, is back for more. He says people break news on Madden Twitch streams now, Jeff.
That's referring. Didn't something happen where someone on a Twitch stream mentioned Pat Queen was going to get cut? Wasn't that?
Was that James Harrison? Didn't James?
Is that
Harrison
what it was?
I thought James Harrison just announced that, and while he was on one of his podcasts with,
like kind of accidentally, I think.
Don't Joe Hayden and James Harrison have a podcast?
Yes.
By the way, yes. The answer is yes. If Patrick Queen wants to come back, bring him back.
Oh,
I would.
Get him to blitz the quarterback. He creates pressure.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Anise. Happy Ravens 410 says odds likely takes a 1-year deal.
His numbers suggest maybe that's what he could do to rehab his value, but he's so young. Like, look at his age. They're just not going to make – there's not many free agents at that age who you think have that much upside. And there's going to be teams with more money that they know what to do with in free agency.
And they'll give him a 1-year, $10 million deal, whereas the Ravens won't be able to do that.
Or they'll give him a huge multi-year that they can get out of pretty quickly if it doesn't work out. I would be surprised if he has to settle for a 1-year deal. Him and Kingsbury share an agent. Maybe if Cliff Kingsbury is their offensive coordinator, there can be something worked out there.
A lot of Cliff hype on the collective tonight. I love to see it.
He's a handsome man too. He wears sweaters like Bobby's.
Yeah, he kind of.
Does he fit it? He fits it too, doesn't he? He probably fits it.
He's smooth.
He looks like a joggers guy. He definitely shops at Lululemon.
Dude, the McDaniel Harbaugh content in LA is going to be absolutely electric for that Chargers social media team, which is already the best in the game.
Yeah.
Gonna be something. That's going to be something. We just can't get out of here, gentlemen, can we? 323 Nas says, which Chargers free agent follows Minter? Anthony Weaver, assistant head coach? Well, guys, it's not going to be Tart. He got himself a nice extension this week, T.R. Tart. So it's not going to be him.
Tony Jefferson.
Yeah.
I'm talking
We've
about it all
been
week.
in contact with him. Hopefully it's inevitable. At some point we get him on. We've all been in contact with him. Happy birthday to Tony Jefferson today.
Is Max a free agent? Cole, were you saying that earlier? Khalil Mack's a free agent?
Khalil Mack's a free agent. Yeah. 35 years old.
I haven't, because of the coaching thing, I haven't really started looking at the free agent list yet.
He was a little banged up at the beginning of the year. Mac was.
Yeah, he missed some time this year with injuries. Yeah.
And he's declined for sure. Like he's kind of going to be that KVN type guy. Again, I mentioned it last pod. If he's like your fourth pass rusher, kind of similar to what the Bills did with Von Miller last year, then sure, like why not? But he can't be the move at edge rusher.
Thanks, guys, and thanks to everybody who donated tonight, came through tonight. Since we've been kind of reminding you to subscribe if you haven't already. Right now, guys, we're at 5,311 subscriptions.
Jeez, that's like 100 tonight.
We've brought in over 1,400 subscriptions in the last 28 days. So needless to say, if you find yourself tonight watching us, if you find yourself in recent weeks watching us, just go and check if you're subscribed. It goes a long way in terms of future sponsorship opportunities, building the channel, hitting that algorithm so that we can have a Twitter account like Cole, who had no clue what happened to Sharon Moore last month.
I'm still shocked. I can't believe Wink Martindale's not coaching at Michigan anymore.
But
hashtag journalism.
But obviously it goes a long way, guys. So if you could on the way out, like the video, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Thanks to Sleeper and Steve. Guys, look at this. We just can't get it. Jeff, they're doing this for you, whether it's super stickers or not. Steve says get Mel Kiper on. Would be fun to see him and Cole talk about the draft.
I want to get on too. Mel's great. He's he's a hard guy to get to before the draft, even though he's a Baltimore guy. I would love to get on Dane Brugler, who's works for the Athletic. He's a terrific draft analyst. I have to get on his schedule early because Dane gets quite busy putting out the beast every year.
Wow, can we reach out to DJ, the old Baltimore ties?
Yep. Yeah, DJ's a good one. I like Emery Hunt, good friend of mine from years ago. I think he's really good on CBS.
What's interesting, guys? Like this week's the Senior Bowl. There's just so little buzz about it because, obviously some guys have pulled out. I know Cole's tweeted about that, but just with all the coaching turmoil and the Belichick stuff now, and
you know what? Nagy left, right? Nagy left. No, I'm not even talking about Matt Nagy. Jim Nagy left. Jim Nagy left the Senior Bowl.
He's the GM of Oklahoma's football program.
That's right. Oh. And when he left, the approach has obviously changed. And Jim Nagy was a guy that I always it always pissed me off because he'd take shots at the smaller all-star games, and it just felt like these are just kids trying to get a showcase. Like, fuck off. But, that type of stuff and the way he marketed the Senior Bowl was effective, and there isn't the hype around it. And, it leads – I was watching my Twitter feed today, and this is just going to be my little quick rant before we get out of here. Stop reacting to one clip from the Senior Bowl in a one-on-one, for fuck's sakes. Like, this happened last year. Mike Green ran through Josh Connerly, and everybody was like, Josh Connerly's a bust. Mike Green's going to go top 10. And then look what happened. And it's just, just breathe a little bit. It's good to see some of these small school guys against top competition. It's good for guys that have been injured, haven't gotten to put in the reps. Guys like that haven't been, multi-year starters that don't have that tape. But my God, you can't change your opinion on a guy from a 4-day showcase and one-on-ones. Like, it's just ridiculous to me.
But yeah, like you see, DeCosta's scheduled to be at that Minter press conference Thursday. So if they're going,
they usually all go, right? Like the Ravens usually have a big delegation down.
Yeah, they do. Mostly scout. Harbaugh wouldn't always go every year, depending, on the year and the timing of it. And when you're hiring coaches, and those things are like meat markets, everybody's coming up to you and trying to get jobs and trying to get spots. So it's almost easier to stay away from there and work the phones. And it's gotten so sophisticated where everything's videotaped. The film of it is really good. Yeah, you want to get a quote close-up look, but you'll get an opportunity at the combine and at private workouts and all that. So, but DeCosta's on the agenda for Thursday. He's supposed to be at the Minter press conference. So if he's at the Senior Bowl, it's going to be a rather short stay because they didn't start till today. And obviously the press conference is Thursday morning.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to catching up with you on the other side of that, and best of luck to Jay-Z on Thursday. And then I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you. We might be doing a week from today. We might be doing an in-person collective.
Maybe
Jeff and I might be shoulder to shoulder. I'm going to get you one of these.
You're gonna have a polo.
Why is that? What am I missing? Why are you here? Well, what's going on?
Are you not? I thought. Are you not? Wait a second.
Am I not going to the Super Bowl?
Oh, are you only okay? You're going to the combine.
Yeah, I'm going to the combine. Yeah, not the Super Bowl. Yeah.
You're not going to Radio Row. I
thought me and Jay-Z will be at home in our sweaters.
The last week in February. I got a little ahead of my skis.
Yeah, February we can do it. Yeah, that'll be fun.
All right.
Maybe Cole could come up. He loves that stuff.
Yeah.
It'd be all these writers in one place. It'd be a lot of scores to settle.
I'm pretty sure there's going to be a list on my passport if I try and cross customs right now.
Okay, then you know what? Since we'll be in Indianapolis, I will get this equivalent in flannel. It'll be thermal flannel material for you and me. All right.
All right, got you.
We have one more super chat. We got to go, man. Happy Ravens 410 says Schefter's report. Davis Webb requested for interview at offensive coordinator, and
is that with us? Is that what that means? Like with us?
It was a little bit earlier. It was about 15 minutes ago.
Oh,
he tweeted, after Broncos pass game coordinator and QB's coach Davis Webb interviewed this week for the Raiders and Bills head coaching jobs, he received interview requests for offensive coordinator jobs with Philadelphia, the Giants, and the Ravens.
Yeah. He was one of the guys that I think would get a second interview if they didn't hire Jesse Minter. And doesn't surprise me. That guy's on the fast track. We've been talking about him for a couple of weeks. He's going to be a head coach. If he's not a head coach this cycle, he almost certainly will be next cycle.
Thanks, Happy Ravens. And thanks to everybody. Big show, almost 2 hours worth. We had no other option but to hang with you, and we're appreciated. It's a great problem to have. And man, everybody keeps listening to the call to action too, because this subscription count is going north and north and north. Right now we're at 5,327. So just in the last couple minutes, people are hitting that sub button. So thanks to everybody. If you could do it on the way out and just check or double check whether or not you subscribed, it helps out significantly. So for Jeff, for Cole, I'm Bobby Trossett signing off. We got the Minter press conference, introductory press conference on Thursday. The three of us will be back, as we always are, in that 8 o'clock format on Tuesday nights right here inside the collective. Thanks to Sleeper. Thanks to all of you. And we'll catch up with you soon.